Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. We'll be flying solo. It's just me and you, ladies and gentlemen. I've got no co-host. My co-host, thanks to the good weather and lots of family gatherings, my co-hosts are all busy, so it's just me with you today. So I want to jump into things. I've got a number of things to deal with, but one of them I want to deal with is a listener response. And we don't get a lot of them. I know there are a lot of people listening, but you're very busy, so you don't have time to take to respond to some crazy radio host. But I wanted to give a shout out to Steve, who is I think he's in North Springfield. Said, I love listening to Right Side Up each week. I'm really concerned about ongoing weather modification, possible alternate purposes of aircraft spraying or dispersing via jet exhaust nanoparticle aluminum, lithium, strontium, and barium, which are radioactive chemicals, to seed clouds, blocking out the sun and holding solar heat under the cloud layer, thus created. Obviously, this being done with at least some cooperation on a federal level, but each state that shines a light on this existential issue is critical to getting more attention in the public sphere. And the email goes on, and we know that Florida has legislation. New Hampshire, I don't believe they got it across the finish line, but there is legislation in New Hampshire as well. This is still, H217 is stuck on the wall in Montpelier. We are out of session now, but there will be some more pushback with regard to H217. You mentioned, Steve, in your email something about, let's see, what is it? Exhaust nanoparticle inclusion. I did not realize, but I have a friend who is an engineer who talked about the possibility that those chemicals could be added into the diesel fuel, which I did not know until a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago. So that's going to be another thing that we're going to try to look into. And by all means, Steve, if you do have more information for us to chase down, drop us a line at rightsideupradio@gmail.com. But I wanted to thank you, our listening audience, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to get a hold of us here at Right Side Up to let us know that you, number one, that you like listening to the show, and number two, that some of your concerns. So that is one of the things that's on the mind of some of the legislators up in Montpelier, me being one of them. And like I said, it's going to be brought to the forefront again next session. Not sure exactly how far we can bring it, but we are going to try to get it on the schedule for testimony to see how far we can push that. It's more and more has come to light that we know that this stuff is happening. One of the main things that bothers me about it is cross-border contamination. If we have cross-border contamination, that means one state is allowed to disperse some of these pollutants, and I'll call them pollutants because aluminum doesn't occur naturally in the atmosphere, along with some of these other elements and chemicals. So why not call them pollutants? But what about, if the state of New York is allowing this, and I'm not saying they are, but if they are, we know that the higher this stuff is dispersed, then the farther it can travel, which means with the prevailing winds taking the winds from, say, upstate New York over Vermont, well, there are ramifications there. And I'm not saying just New York. I don't know what exactly is happening over the airspace of New York, but even if it's 400, 600, 800 miles away, it's going to travel at a very rapid rate at the levels that this stuff is being dispersed. So we want to thank our listeners for taking the time to get a hold of us. And then that will remain on the minds of legislators in Montpelier. I can tell you that. It was talked about numerous times, but it will come up again in committee. So I want to switch gears here to another topic that it's going to stay in the forefront, mostly because of the federal administration now keeping it in the forefront. And I'm going to refer to another author, on Substack, one that I referred to numerous times because he puts out a lot of material with respect to climate change and the falsehoods, and tries to bring a lot of reality to and bring receipts, brings facts to the argument, to the debate. And I'm talking about, Thomas J. Shepstone at Energy, Security, and Freedom. This one from Substack is dated June 23, 2025. And it's titled, "What if the climate cause is based on one big fat lie and everything involved knows it?" Okay, let's see. The following article is from Issues and Insights, which deserves every freedom lover's support. Okay, carbon dioxide, we've been told over and again, is the enemy that must be subdued if we are to avoid catastrophic global warming. It is, however, a faulty premise. Physics, not politics, tells us that man's CO2 emissions will not cause catastrophic climate change, nor an increase in extreme weather. The common belief that CO2 is the main driver of climate change and the EPA endangerment finding assertion that elevated concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere may reasonably be anticipated to endanger the public health and welfare are scientifically false, conclude the authors of a new paper. Richard Lindzen and William Happer are not political hacks. They are serious researchers with extensive experience and robust academic backgrounds. Lindzen is Emeritus Professor of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Happer, a Princeton University Emeritus Physics Professor. What they have to say is important in a world that is sodden with climate-related myths and folk tales. And in the middle of this article, there's a great quote that I'm going to read from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And the quote goes like this: "Let the lie come into the world. Let it even triumph, but not through me. The simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie." And that's a quote again, ladies and gentlemen, from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And we here at Right Side Up are going to bring the receipts to show what is false about these climate issues and what are actual facts. And we know from basic science that CO2 is a plant nutrient, and without it, our plants die. In return, we die because there will be no production from our plants of oxygen that we need. So let me get back to the article here. While Democrats and their leftist counterparts in other advanced nations have gone to war on carbon dioxide, Lindzen and Happer argue that cutting CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050 and eliminating fossil fuel use, quote, will have a trivial effect on temperature. How can they say this? After all, don't 97% of scientists agree that humanity's use of fossil fuels is causing our world to overheat? They don't. More on that later. Lindzen and Happer confidently make those statements because, quote, unscientific evidence is the fundamental basis, end quote, behind the rush to net zero greenhouse gas emissions, as well as the EPA's claim that, quote, elevated concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere may reasonably be anticipated to endanger the public health and to endanger the public welfare of current and future generations. They used the term unscientific because the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is government control and thus only publishes government opinions, not science. The summaries for policymakers that are produced by the IPCC are approved line by line by member governments, which override any inconsistent conclusions scientists write for IPCC reports. The Parasite, a 1995 report that was rewritten to say, quote, the balance of evidence suggests a discernible human influence on global climate, end quote, and was the opposite of the language from a draft composed by independent scientists. Not only has the IPCC failed to correct this fabrication, it, quote, has repeatedly reported the same false science ever since, end quote. Inconsistent with the climate narrative but consistent with reality, Lindzen and Happer also point out that CO2 is not only a weak greenhouse gas, its impact decreases as its atmospheric levels rise. It becomes less effective greenhouse gas at higher concentrations because of what in physics is called saturation. Each additional increase of CO2 in the atmosphere causes a smaller and smaller change in radiative forcing or in temperature. Simply put, the common assumption that carbon dioxide is, in the IPCC's words, the main driver of climate change is scientifically false. Now back to the 97% claim. It relies on the dubious assertion that the acknowledgement by many that man's CO2 emissions have a mild, harmless influence on the climate is the same as believing that man is causing a catastrophe. These are conflicting positions, yet they're lumped together in the 97% of political purposes. The assertion that 97% of scientists believe that climate change is a man-made urgent problem is fiction. The so-called consensus comes from a handful of surveys and abstract counting exercises that have been contradicted by more reliable research. Former Heartland Institute President and Chief Executive Joseph Bast and University of Alabama in Huntsville climate scientist Roy Spencer wrote in 2014 in the Wall Street Journal. Furthermore, science is not determined by consensus. Lindzen and Happer remind us it is guided by experiment and observations. The climate tale is based on such a wobbly foundation, and its adherents screech so loudly and shade the truth so often that we can't help but believe they know they've been intentionally misleading the public. Maybe we've reached a Solzhenitsyn moment in which we know they're lying, they know they're lying, and they even know that we know they're lying. And they still don't care because for them it's all about raw political power and the acquisition of other people's money. Let me just read this last couple of statements again. Maybe we've reached a Solzhenitsyn moment in which we know they're lying, they know they're lying, and they even know that we know they're lying. And they still don't care because for them it's all about raw political power and the acquisition of other people's money. And that's really, ladies and gentlemen, I think is what it's about. Raw political power and the acquisition of your money and my money. Because you control the energy, you control the money, you have all the power over the people that basically that you're really going to need. And we've seen in the last administration, thankfully it's gone, with inflation and, quote, supply chain issues has done to our savings, to our rates of pay. And you know, in this state of Vermont, where every time you go out and you talk, whether you go to a dinner party, whether you go to the grocery store, whether you go to the gas station, people talk about rising costs. And they talk about friends and family who've decided when they retire or even before, whether maybe they graduate from school, college, whatever. And they just say they just can't afford to stay here anymore. This is what we're up against, ladies and gentlemen. So this is why I always refer back to some of my Substack authors, because they bring facts. They try to bring things based in reality, and that's what we're about here. We want to be based in reality. So with that, we're going to have to take a break and get some bills paid, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Right Side Up. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia, flying solo today, but we will work our way through it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to switch gears a little bit. It's still related to climate and a lot of the falsehoods that are being debunked and some of the issues that come along with some of these climate green energy schemes that have come our way, especially in Vermont, and they're going to the chickens are coming home to roost. So I want to get into another article here. This is from Vermont Daily Chronicle by Allison Despathy. This is from June 17. Solar panels, Vermont's new sacred cow. Let's see. What does Vermont mean to you? If farms, forests, and stewardship come to mind, please read on. In 1925, Vermont had over 3.3 million acres of agricultural land. Fast forward to 2022, and this number has dwindled to 543,096 acres. And on the article, it shows a graph from Agency of Agriculture with the decline. But let's see, getting back to it. Many factors have led to declines in agricultural land over the years, but a recent contributor to this alarming trend is industrial-scale solar development, which brings ecological devastation and threatens food security. Steep reductions in agricultural land, specifically due to industrial solar, are happening nationwide, with several states such as Oregon, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey passing laws and crafting legislation to protect agricultural land. Out-of-state commodities investors, global corporations, and renewable energy developers are purchasing and leasing land in Vermont because it is comparatively cheap, and subsidies and tax incentives for renewable energy development exist, as well as high market rates for the ownership of this renewable energy. Nearly all solar projects developed by Vermont solar developers are sold to out-of-state hedge funds and investment banks after permitting or construction. This situation is creating the perfect storm for Vermonters and our cherished environment to be preyed upon, while wealthy renewable energy developers and investors reap the benefits. Vermont is poised to become an industrial solar plantation, with developers selling high-value renewable energy power and renewable energy credits to the highest bidders. The power does not have to be used or stay in Vermont, and other states can buy this power or the RECs and claim they have met their state's renewable energy mandates. Corporations can also purchase these RECs to claim they are a green company, which then boosts their ESG, environmental social governance rating, and attracts investors. So one of the reasons I bring this up today, ladies and gentlemen, is we are in a little bit of a heat wave, if you will. Temperatures are supposed to get, let's see, by air, this is Tuesday, so Monday, yesterday, will have been somewhere in the 90s. I read one article where there were cooling stations going to be open because of the threat of heat. And there's going to be plenty of sunshine for these solar panels. But what about when the sun goes down? What about when it's raining? What about, like this article is referring to, where we have the notion that if we are concerned about our food security in this state, if we're concerned about burning excess petroleum in the form of gasoline and diesel to ship our food and produce into this state to be able to feed the population of this state, then why are we taking what is a good working land, whether it be pasture land, tillable land for some sort of produce, or working forest for the wood products industry? Why are we going to put solar panels on this land that is not going to last forever, and, as this article states, is going to create a problem in Vermont's future, and not so distant future? So this is why I bring this up. We have plenty of hot weather, sunshine today. These solar panels, if in my view were in private use, that's a good thing. But for this industrial solar idea, I think is a bad fit for the Green Mountain State. But let me get back into this article. Keep in mind, there is no energy transition happening. With the massive expansion and implementation of artificial intelligence, AI, and the Internet of Things, IoT, in all sectors, energy consumption will continue to increase exponentially. Governments, healthcare, education, industry, Hollywood, sports teams, and individual use of AI all contribute to this unfathomable growth and its unimaginable power and data storage demands. These technologies consume land, water, and energy at rates never witnessed before. People have been sold a lie when it comes to the energy transition. The days of reduced consumption are long gone. Striving for continued efficiency remains a worthy goal, yet industrial-scale solar power in our often cloudy Vermont, when sited in the wrong place, is inefficient, unreliable, and destructive to entire ecosystems and food security. It all sounds hypocritical because it is. How do Vermonters feel about this? On June 1, I visited a proposed industrial solar site in Fairhaven, Vermont. This project would cover 110 acres, yet that's 110 acres of absolutely beautiful, high-quality agricultural land. This project is under review at the Public Utility Commission. It was heartbreaking to walk this land and picture it with the topsoil ripped off and the earth heavily compacted and covered with industrial solar panels, causing erosion and permanently compromising the health of this farmland, especially given the fact that taxpayers are subsidizing this development, a form of corporate welfare. The power purchase agreement does not have to be established prior to approval. Vermont does not hold any guarantee of the power. Vermonters may be on the hook for higher electricity costs and increased transmission and distribution costs. Developers are positioned to rake in unimaginable revenue, and permanent loss of Vermont's agricultural land is guaranteed. This is clearly a lose-lose situation for Vermont. Sadly, this Fairhaven project is only one of several industrial-scale solar projects proposed at this time by the Connecticut-based commodities trading company Freepoint Commodities, aka VT Real Estate Holdings, in Shaftesbury, Vermont. Freepoint Commodities has also applied to the PUC for a 20-megawatt solar project, which has drawn significant opposition from the surrounding landowners and communities. The Shaftesbury project would cover 80 acres of prime agricultural land and rolling hillsides. The project includes 45 acres of deforestation with documented compromise to ecosystems and native species. There is also discussion of Freepoint's 50-megawatt industrial solar project proposal in Panton, Vermont, which would host a 300-acre industrial solar plantation on mostly agricultural land. For years, the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets has been educating legislators at the State House about the alarming loss of prime agricultural land. The Democratic leadership has taken zero action to protect prime agricultural land and prevent Vermont from this predatory behavior by well-funded, lawyer-heavy renewable energy developers. Now, I want to break from the article for a minute and remind you of the Global Warming Solutions Act. We talk about this a lot, and I'm going to continue to talk about it until we can actually change those mandates to goals. Because in the Global Warming Solutions Act, it talks of reductions of carbon emissions. We cannot achieve reduction of carbon emissions, reductions to in some cases 1990 levels, when we are looking to increase our workforce, increase the number of homes we're building. Over a 5-year period, I think we're looking to, the goal is 41,000 new homes. You cannot decrease to somewhere in the 1990s levels of emissions if you're looking to grow the population, bring in tradespeople, keep young people here to grow families. And we are talking out of both sides of our mouths in this state. We are not based in reality. This is why they need to be goals. We need to have some sort of balance if we want to grow the population of the state, if we want to grow the economy of the state, if we want to have more homes for the growing population in this state. We cannot return to 1990s levels of emissions. We just can't do that. The only way we could do that is with preserving wildlands, which means no population growth, which means higher taxes in the state, because there will be fewer and fewer people who can stay here, and there will be more and more drive for the roads to be maintained, whether there's 20,000 people fewer a year in Vermont or 50,000 people fewer in Vermont. If you're trying to turn Vermont into some sort of a country club atmosphere, this is what you do. But if you're trying to grow a population, then you change your mandates to goals. And you don't lose sight of the fact that you want to remain a beautiful Green Mountain state and you want to be environmentally friendly. But you also want to have common sense be part of the debate and part of the equation. You want to have balance. You don't want to completely close the state to any young people or someone who has not, with the benefit of a golden parachute or a job where you don't work outside, you're not working the land, you're not working in agriculture or in forestry, you're not a logger, you're not a builder, but maybe you're a keyboard warrior, then this would be a great state, because then you just sit in your air-conditioned home with your partially or wholly subsidized heat pump and look at the beautiful green mountains and the pasture, if there is one, that you don't have to look at a solar farm. So this is one of the reasons why I keep bringing this up. This is one of the reasons why I think energy needs to be part of what we talk about in this show on a regular basis. Let's see. Let me get back to the article here. The controversial Renewable Energy Standard was passed last session by the supermajority despite the governor's veto. The Renewable Energy Standard mandates aggressive requirements for renewable energy in Vermont, yet fails to address these unresolved issues of siting and project placement, appropriate industrial solar regulations, expensive distribution and transmission costs, ratepayer protections, and the unreliable nature of renewable energy, especially in Vermont. And now I want to get back to the break from the article again. Renewable Energy Standard. It's basically dormant right now. Act 18 needs to be taken up, needs to be taken off the wall, and it needs to be repealed, because being dormant, just leaves it for the party that wants to see this renewable energy standard grow and come into fruition. They just want to bring it back. If there is an election cycle, and the Democrats have stated this out loud, that they were just waiting for the next election cycle to win seats back, to get a larger majority so that they can revive the renewable energy standard, make it an emergency again, and pass the regulations, send the puck their regulations, and give them the go-ahead to force rate increases on petroleum products, to force subsidies for the state. So we at Right Side Up are going to continue to hammer this subject, because if we are looking to grow the economy in this state, if we're looking to keep young people here, then there's only one way to do it, and that's to take the Renewable Energy Standard, run it through the shredder, take the Global Warming Solutions Act and reduce those mandates to goals, and stop taking our beautiful working lands, our agricultural lands, our forests, and turning them into solar fields, because they are not the future of this state. They are not the future of this country. I firmly believe if you want to put solar panels on your private property, that's one thing, but industrial solar in Vermont is not going to solve our energy needs, in my personal opinion, ladies and gentlemen. We've come to the end of another segment, so we've got to pay some bills. We'll be back in a couple minutes. You're listening to Right Side Up. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. Before we get back into our discussion today, I just want to remind our listeners, if you need to drop us a line, rightsideUpradio@gmail.com. If you, for some reason, can't catch us on the radio at WNTK, go to WNTK.com. Click on the podcast button, scroll down to Right Side Up, and you will find any number of our shows. By all means, please listen, share with a friend if you like it. You can find us on 802 Scoop Facebook and 802 Scoop YouTube. You can also find us on granitegrok.com. Thanks to the folks at Granite Grok for helping us spread the word. You can also find us on Podbean. So there are a number of vehicles that you can listen to us, and we're thankful that you do. But I want to continue to talk about solar, but address a different issue that's come up with the change of federal administration. We have had a little change in the feeling toward renewable energy, the green energy. Some of us call it a scam, but I want to continue on this because I just feel like, and just to remind our listeners, I live completely off grid. I use solar, I use batteries, and I use a generator. We do not get a regular electric bill, but we do it for the independents. I know when my wife and I were both working in jobs where we had coworkers who lived on the grid, it was always funny to hear people say after a thunderstorm or a snowstorm where there was damage to power lines, "How long were you out without power last night?" And it was always great to smile and say we were never without power because we live off grid. We have all we need. So I just want to bring that up and remind my listeners, because I do use solar, and I believe solar should be used as a private sector resource. I do not believe it should be something that is pushed by our government. After so many years now, we know what it's capable of, but we also know what its limitations are. And we have seen the idea that subsidizing would prime the pump, if you will, for the solar industry. But the problem is the pros and the cons. If you look at them, for a lot of people, the cons are the list on the con column is just too large. So, and with that, I just wanted to get back to another article that I found. This is from Zero Hedge, author Tyler Durden, June 23, 2025. Let's see. The title of the article is "Real Distress Hits Solar Industry as Bankruptcy Tsunami Looms." It's no secret that progressive billionaire elites, their dark money-funded NGOs, and far-left lawmakers and legacy corporate media orchestrated one of the most elaborate propaganda campaigns in recent memory, weaponizing the narrative of an imminent climate crisis to ram through green legislation on Capitol Hill. The result, a massive heist on the Treasury, all under the noble guise of saving the planet. It's almost as if the climate crisis only dominated headlines when Democrats needed political cover to push green legislation through Capitol Hill. And there's a great graph that they show in the article that shows from the beginning of AOC's, or the introduction of the Green New Deal, with the spikes in the, let's see, what was it? The IRA spiked when it was passed and when it was introduced, and then how the graph drops all the way to 2025, where it's almost down as low as when the Green New Deal was introduced. But getting back to the article, now the darker side of the green scam is coming into focus. Reuters reported earlier this week that a draft tax bill released by Senate Finance Committee Chair Mike Crapo, Republican from Idaho, proposes an accelerated phase-out of green energy subsidies established under the Biden-Harris regime's 2020 Inflation Reduction Act. That's what I was referring to as IRA. Specifically, the legislation would significantly dial back solar and wind tax credits to 60% of their original value starting in 2026, with complete elimination by 2028. Under current law, these credits are scheduled to begin phasing out in 2032, meaning the proposal would effectively shorten the incentive window. And I think this is a good thing. Crapo stated in a press release that his draft bill, quote, achieves significant savings by slashing Green New Deal spending and targeting waste, fraud, and abuse in spending programs while preserving and protecting them for the most vulnerable, end quote. Slashing clean energy credits, tax credits, essentially the lifeline of the green industry, would unleash a tsunami of bankruptcies across the sector. Think of Solindra's high-profile collapse under the Obama administration in 2011, but multiplied many times over. It's not final, but it looks very negative. This is a quote from Carter Atlemazoglu. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. Managing Director of FTI Consulting, who specializes in renewable energy, referring to the Senate's latest draft of the tax bill. Let's see. The director of FTI Consulting told the Financial Times, "You're dealing with a lot of major uncertainty, which makes anyone considering residential solar, from homeowners to financiers, basically wait and see what happens next. Firms are under liquidity pressure, and we're seeing real distress in the industry," he warned, pointing out that, quote, things are coming to a head. FT cited bankruptcy data showing a sharp uptick in clean energy company failures starting in 2022 and accelerating significantly by 2024. Many of these firms, heavily reliant on federal tax credits, are now collapsing as subsidies dry up. Ladies and gentlemen, my concern about this, whether it be solar, wind, whatever you're talking about, green, if after so many years this industry has not been able to take off on its own. Think of some of the other really popular things that took off, where people were waiting in line. They couldn't wait. They were paying over at or above list price to get these things. Think of the iPhone when it came out. Every time there was a new version for the first few years, people were camping out to go get these. And now we're seeing that the green energy subsidies have to stay in place. Whether we're talking about subsidies for chargers, for solar fields, for wind, all of this stuff is still requiring subsidies for people to be able to use it. And most people who are using this are people who really can afford to pay the expense on their own. And those who can least afford it don't have the ability to take advantage of these subsidies because they don't have any spare cash to throw into a project like this. Mass liquidations and layoffs are set to plague the industry this year. This trend will be accelerating if those tax credits are eliminated. Quote, there's going to be a 50 to 60% downturn in demand that will wreak havoc on a lot of these solar companies, end quote, warned Ara Agopian, CEO of Solar Insure. Agopian said, quote, many of them will shut their doors as they can't stay in business without the tax credits, end quote. Since the release of the Senate draft, solar stocks have crashed. Sunrun is down 36%. Solar Edge is down 30%. Enphase is down 21%, and First Solar is down 19%. Solindra's downfall remains a cautionary tale in the clean energy space. We're looking at a 6-month cliff and thousands of businesses having to completely remake their business models in the space of mere months. said CEO Dan Conant of Solar Holler, warned, it's just impossible to do. So this is one of the reasons why I keep saying these subsidized industries, if they've been subsidized for this long, then they obviously can't exist on their own. And ladies and gentlemen, you and I, especially in this Green Mountain state, we not afford to be subsidizing, like I said, these great big massive solar projects that'll eventually be bought up by hedge funds, and they'll be used for profits for people who have the wherewithal to invest in these companies, while electric rates, energy rates in this state continue to go up. Please, let's not forget, like I said, where it's probably yesterday was somewhere in the 90s, especially in some of the cities in Vermont, Burlington, Springfield, Montpelier, stuff like that, where there was high electricity demand. Well, we know in Burlington, I think in Montpelier, we've got the Rygate chip plant. Those there's 3 plants running, producing electricity that's in high demand this time of year for what? For cooling for all the buildings in the cities. Now, if there's solar with the sun shining, that's great, but the cooling will be required after the sun goes down. The heat is going to remain. The heat isn't going to go away. But the problem is, okay, solar is not going to be producing. If you don't have the battery capacity to do that, then you're relying on other forms of energy. And like we've covered before on this show, with the use of natural gas, if it was available in higher quantities and through a pipeline that doesn't exist because the green energy crowd put an end to it a decade or so ago, then you really wind up using less efficient, more polluting forms of energy. So you're really less green than your intentions. This is why on Right Side Up, we're always going to we're always going to be advocating for redundancy in our systems. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, okay, fine. If you want to have some sort of solar, like in cities where you can put solar on parking garages or on top of the flat roofs of the storage unit, the rental storage units, or on residential homes, that would be great. But if you have options, redundancy, then you still have, let's find a way to get natural gas piped into these cities where natural gas can be used to generate electricity. We have chip burning plants in this state. We have working lands in this state where those chip plants can be supplied with the fuel to provide the energy. So that works out great. But let's have another option. Why not have 3 options and use other forms of petroleum products instead of just natural gas? Use oil to provide for electricity, or expand instead of dismantling hydroelectric plants, because electric plants right now are green, but there isn't a push in this state to have hydroelectric redefined to be not a green energy source, which is very troubling to me, and it doesn't seem to make sense. So we need balance. We need redundancy in our system if we're going to keep our population safe, cool in the summer, warm, more especially warm in the winter, and keep the lights on as well. So we've come to the end of another show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you share it with friends. And please remember, stay informed, stay safe, listen to Right Side Up.